The red taillights of the old pickup truck flickered like dying embers in the humid twilight, casting erratic shadows on the cracked asphalt of the rural intersection. It was one of those forgotten crossroads in the heart of the Midwest, where cornfields stretched endlessly under a bruised sky, and the air hung heavy with the scent of rain-soaked earth and distant exhaust. At the stoplight, barely visible through the truck's grimy window, a boy no older than 12 huddled in the passenger seat, his small frame trembling. His face was pale, streaked with what looked like dirt or tears, and his eyes, wide with a terror that no child should know, locked onto the lone figure on the motorcycle idling beside them. The boy's lips moved silently at first, then with desperate urgency, he cracked the window just enough to whisper, "Save me." The words were a fragile thread, carried on the low rumble of the bike's engine, slicing through the evening quiet like a plea from the edge of oblivion. Ethan Hale, the rider, felt it before he fully heard it, a chill that had nothing to do with the cooling breeze off the fields. At 42, Ethan was a man forged in the fires of old wars and older regrets, his broad shoulders etched with faded tattoos from a life spent chasing horizons on 2 wheels. The Iron Oath MC patch on his leather vest gleamed dully under the street lamp, a symbol of the brotherhood he'd sworn to after losing his squad in a desert ambush 2 decades back. That night in the sand had birthed a promise, to stand for the broken, the overlooked, no matter the cost. He'd buried it deep under miles of blacktop and barroom brawls, but promises like that didn't fade. They waited, coiled like a serpent in the gut. Ethan's calloused hand tightened on the throttle as he glanced over, meeting the boy's gaze. In that split second, the light turned green, but Ethan didn't move. Instead, he killed the engine, the sudden silence amplifying the boy's ragged breathing. The truck's driver, a wiry man with a gaunt face and eyes like chipped flint, shot Ethan a warning glare through the side mirror, but Ethan held steady, his voice low and gravel rough. "Kid, you need out?" The boy nodded frantically, his whisper turning to a choked sob. "Please. He's not my dad." Ethan's jaw set, a storm brewing behind his steel-grey eyes. This wasn't just a stoplight encounter, it was a reckoning, the kind that could pull a man back from the numbness he'd built his life around. He swung his leg off the bike, boots crunching on gravel, and rapped on the truck door. "Let the boy out, now!" What if you've ever felt that pull, the one that drags you from your solitary path into someone else's nightmare? Drop a comment below. Have you ever stopped to help a stranger in a moment like this? And how did it change you? Share your story. These roads connect us all. The driver snarled something incoherent, slamming the truck into gear as if to bolt. But Ethan stepped forward, his presence a wall of quiet menace. The air thickened with tension, the distant hum of cicadas underscoring the standoff. Ethan didn't raise a fist. He didn't need to. Years of riding with the Iron Oath had taught him that true power lay in the unyielding stand, in the promise to protect what couldn't protect itself. "Walk away clean, or we do this the hard way," Ethan said, his tone even, like the calm before a thunderclap. The man hesitated, fingers drumming the wheel, then spat a curse and shoved the door open. The boy tumbled out, clutching a worn backpack like a lifeline, his sneakers scuffing the pavement as he darted behind Ethan. The truck peeled away in a spray of loose stones, tail lights vanishing into the gathering dusk, leaving only the echo of tires on the horizon. Ethan knelt to the boy's level, the scent of leather and motor oil mingling with the boy's faint, acrid fear. "Name's Ethan. What's yours, kid?" The boy wiped his nose on his sleeve, voice barely above a whisper. "Lucas. They took me from my mom's place last night. Said she owed money." Lucas's eyes darted to the empty road, as if expecting the truck to circle back. Ethan's mind raced, fragments of his own past surfacing like ghosts. The sister he couldn't save from a bad crowd, the promise he'd made to her on her deathbed to watch for the lost ones. He pulled out his phone, the screen glowing faintly in the twilight. "We're getting you safe. But first, tell me everything." As Lucas spoke in halting bursts, tales of a run-down trailer park, a mother working double shifts at a diner, and men who came collecting with threats instead of words. Ethan's resolve hardened. This wasn't random. It smelled of the underbelly he knew too well, the kind of debt shark operations that preyed on the desperate in these forgotten towns. By the time the stars pricked the velvet sky, Ethan had Lucas on the back of the bike, a spare helmet strapped tight. The engine roared to life, a beast awakening, and they cut through the night toward the nearest outpost of the Iron Oath, a weathered garage on the edge of town, where the air always carried the tang of gasoline and welding sparks. Ethan's mind churned with plans, calls to the brothers scattered across state lines, a safe house for the kid, and the slow unraveling of whatever web had ensnared this family. But deeper, it stirred the embers of his own redemption. He'd walked away from too many fights, let too many promises slip like smoke. Not this time. As the wind whipped past, carrying the boy's tentative grip on his jacket, Ethan felt the weight of it all, the unspoken oath to be the shield for those who had none. They pulled into the garage under the harsh fluorescence of floodlights, the Iron Oath emblem, a clenched fist around a broken chain, painted bold on the cinderblock wall. Brothers emerged from the shadows, grizzled veterans like Marcus, with his scarred knuckles from prison yard brawls, and young firebrand Tyler, fresh from his own tour overseas. Ethan dismounted, helping Lucas down with a gentleness that belied his rough exterior. "This is the crew," he said, clapping Lucas on the shoulder. "We don't leave family behind, blood or not." The boy's eyes widened at the circle of leather-clad figures, their faces a map of shared battles and buried sorrows. Marcus nodded toward a back room where cots and fresh clothes waited. "Get him settled. We ride at dawn, if we have to." As Lucas disappeared inside, Ethan stepped out into the cooling night, lighting a cigarette with hands that still trembled faintly from the adrenaline. The promise he'd whispered to his sister all those years ago echoed now. "I'll make it right for the ones like you." This boy, this chance encounter at a stoplight, was the spark. But Ethan knew the road ahead would test everything. The corruption hiding behind small-town smiles, the men who'd come for Lucas with more than threats. He exhaled smoke into the darkness, the ember glowing like a vow renewed. Dawn would bring the call to the brotherhood, engines thundering in unity. For Ethan Hale, the biker who'd turned around, this was just the beginning of keeping his word. The first light of dawn crept over the horizon like a hesitant promise, painting the garage's rusted metal roof in hues of amber and steel grey. Ethan stood outside, the cigarette long since burned to ash between his fingers, its bitter smoke lingering in the crisp morning air. The Midwest woke slowly here, with the low murmur of farm equipment stirring in the distance, and the faint scent of dew-kissed fields cutting through the ever-present tang of oil and rubber. Inside, Lucas slept fitfully on a cot, his small chest rising and falling under a threadbare blanket, the weight of the night etched in the shadows under his eyes. Ethan watched from the doorway, his own sleep stolen by the ghosts that rescue had summoned. This wasn't just about the boy anymore, it was the unraveling of a thread that tugged at the frayed edges of his soul. He pulled out his phone again, the screen's glow harsh against the dim interior. The Iron Oath network was a web of whispers and rides across backroads, brothers bound by oaths forged in blood and brotherhood. Ethan's thumb hovered over Marcus's number first, the old warhorse who'd pulled him from the sand after that ambush, trading a lungful of shrapnel for a lifetime of loyalty. The call connected on the second ring, Marcus's voice gravelly from years of late nights and louder engines. "Hale, what's the fire?" Ethan kept it brief, the words clipped like rounds in a chamber. The stoplight, the whisper, the truck vanishing into the dark. Marcus listened in silence, then grunted. Sounds like the Reaper's game. Those debt hounds been sniffing around the trailer parks up north. Bring the kid to the central hall by noon. We'll circle the wagons. Next came the broader call, a group text rippling out to the scattered chapters from the dusty plains of Oklahoma to the Rust Belt edges of Ohio. Ride needed. Lost lamb in the fold. Coordinates incoming. Oath holds. Responses flooded in like thunder rolling. Tyler confirming from a truck stop 2 hours out. Jonathan pledging a dozen from the eastern flank. Samuel vowing to scout the roads for tales. The Iron Oath wasn't a gang. It was a covenant, born from the ashes of battles where promises were the only currency that mattered. Ethan had joined after his sister's overdose, her final words a plea to find the ones who fall through. He'd ridden alone for years, honoring it in quiet ways, dropping supplies at shelters, staring down dealers in dive bars. But this demanded the full thunder. As the sun climbed, casting long shadows across the concrete floor, Lucas stirred. He sat up, rubbing his eyes. The backpack clutched like a talisman. Ethan handed him a mug of black coffee, weak from the communal pot, and a plate of jerky from the stash. Eat, then we talk more. The boy nodded, his voice steadier now, though laced with the raw edge of truth unsaid. Mom's at the diner in Willow Creek, place called Hope's. She works nights, tries to keep the lights on. But these guys, they came after Grandpa died, said we owed for his loans, medical stuff. Lucas's gaze dropped to the floor, tracing cracks like veins in the earth. Ethan leaned against the workbench, tools glinting in the light, and felt the old ache twist. His own father had drowned in debt after the mill closed, leaving a family splintered. Promises broken then had scarred him deep, but the oath had mended the fractures with iron will. The garage door rattled open, admitting Tyler on his battered Harley, the engine's growl fading to a purr. He was younger, mid-30s, with a fresh scar across his jaw from a stateside skirmish that ended his military days. Heard the call. Kid looks like he could use a real meal. Tyler ruffled Lucas's hair gently, earning a tentative smile, the first crack in the boy's armor. Together, they mapped the route on a worn atlas, fingers tracing highways that snaked through corn and small towns. But Ethan's instincts prickled as they loaded up. A black sedan idled at the road's edge, too sleek for these parts. No plates visible, just a shadow behind tinted glass. Eyes open, Ethan murmured to Tyler, who nodded, hand drifting to the concealed piece under his vest. They weren't outlaws, but the world often painted them as such, and trust was a luxury they couldn't afford. The ride to Willow Creek was a blur of wind and resolve, the bike's vibration syncing with the pulse of purpose in Ethan's veins. Lucas clung tight, the helmet bobbing with each curve, the landscape unfolding in wide, golden sweeps under a sky clearing to blue. They hit the town limits by mid-morning, the main drag lined with faded storefronts and pickups parked crooked. Hope's Diner squatted at the corner, its neon sign flickering even in daylight, the air outside thick with the sizzle of grease and fresh pie. Ethan parked, boots hitting pavement with a solid thud, and scanned the lot. No sign of the truck, but the sedan trailed at a distance, circling like a vulture. Inside, the diner hummed with locals, farmers nursing coffees, a waitress with tired eyes weaving between booths. Lucas pointed to a door behind the counter. That's her station. Ethan approached, voice low as he caught the woman's attention. She was in her late 30s, hair pulled back in a practical knot, lines of worry carving her face. "Ma'am, name's Ethan. Your boy's safe." Her eyes, mirrors of Lucas's, widened, a hand flying to her mouth as she glanced toward the door. "Olivia! God, where is he?" The reunion was quiet, raw, Lucas rushing into her arms, tears silent but fierce, the scent of coffee and flour enveloping them like a fragile shield. But joy fractured fast. Olivia pulled back, Voice a whisper. They'll come for us. The collectors. They're tied to the sheriff's office here. Bad blood from years back. Ethan's blood cooled to ice. Corruption, the kind that festered in small towns, wearing badges like masks. He'd seen it before. Veterans denied aid, families bled dry by official hands. The oath's code burned brighter. Justice, not by law's letter, but its spirit. "We handle it," he said, meeting her gaze. "The brothers are coming. No one touches chosen family." As they stepped out, the sedan blocked the exit. Two men emerging, suits ill-fitting over bulky frames, one flashing a badge that gleamed false under the sun. "Boys coming with us. Custody issue." Ethan's stance widened, Tyler at his flank, the air crackling with unspoken threat. Lucas shrank behind Olivia, but Ethan's voice cut clear, steady as forged steel. "Over my ride." The standoff hung, engines idling in the distance. More bikes approaching, a horizon of leather and loyalty. This was the oath awakening, promises colliding with the present. For Ethan, the turn at the light had ignited a fire that no shadow could quench. And now, I invite you to leave in the comments where you're watching from and the exact hour you heard this story. We wish to know how far these northern confessions travel and at what moments they reach you. The sun beat down on the cracked pavement of Willow Creek's main drag, turning the air into a shimmering haze that distorted the edges of the world. Ethan Hale stood firm, his boots planted like roots in the earth, the weight of his leather vest a familiar anchor against the rising heat. Tyler flanked him, arms crossed over his chest, the subtle bulge of resolve under his jacket speaking volumes without a word. Behind them, Olivia clutched Lucas close, her fingers digging into the boy's shoulder as if to merge their fears into one unbreakable shield. The two men from the sedan advanced a step. The one with the badge, Sheriff Harlan by the tarnished star pinned to his shirt, squinting against the glare, his mustache twitching like a cornered rat's whiskers. The other, broader and silent, cracked his knuckles, the sound sharp as breaking twigs in the tense quiet. "You bikers think you can roll into my town and play hero?" Harlan drawled, his voice laced with the false authority of a man who'd long sold his soul for scraps. The badge caught the light, but it rang hollow to Ethan's eyes, a prop in a play of corruption that reeked of backroom deals and silenced debts. Ethan didn't flinch. He'd stared down worse in the dunes of forgotten wars, where promises were etched in blood under a merciless sun. "This ain't about territory," he replied, his tone low and even, carrying the rumble of distant thunder. "It's about a kid who asked for help, and we're answering." Lucas peeked out from behind Olivia, his eyes wide but no longer wild with terror, something like hope flickering there, fragile as a match in the wind. The sheriff's partner shifted, hand hovering near his belt, but the low growl of approaching engines froze him mid-motion. From the east, the horizon trembled as the Iron Oath convoy crested the rise, a line of chrome and black thunder, at least 20 strong, their vests flashing like badges of a higher law. Marcus led the pack on his vintage Indian, scars on his face pulling tight in a grim smile as he throttled down, the beast of a bike settling with a sigh. Jonathan and Samuel pulled up beside him, engines cutting off in unison, the sudden silence amplifying the creak of leather and the faint jingle of chains. They dismounted as one, a wall of quiet solidarity forming behind Ethan, their presence not aggressive but unyielding, like ancient oaks against a storm. Tyler nodded to them, a silent tally of brothers answering the call. Harlan's face paled beneath the sweat beading on his brow, the scent of his cheap cologne mixing with the diner's outflow of frying oil and burnt coffee. "This is official business. Kids under protective custody. Family debts, runaway claims. Step aside, or I'll have the whole department down here." But his eyes darted to the growing circle of riders, the weight of their gaze pressing like an invisible force. Olivia stepped forward then, her voice steady, despite the tremor in her hands. "Protective? You mean the ones who dragged him away in the night? My boys know runaway and those debts. They started with your help after my father passed. Promises of loans that turned to chains. Her words hung in the air, a quiet accusation that pierced the sheriff's bluster. Lucas nodded against her side, whispering, "They hurt Grandpa. Said it was for the bills." Ethan felt the old fire stir, the one born from his own fractured past, the Milltown debts that had claimed his father, leaving a boy to swear oaths in the dark. He'd ridden away from that pain. But the iron oath had given it purpose, turning scars into shields. Marcus moved closer, his voice a gravel whisper meant for Ethan's ear alone. Scouts spotted more sedans circling the outskirts. This runs deep. Town hall ties, maybe state lines. We get 'em clear, then we dig. Ethan nodded, his mind mapping the escape. Back roads through the fields. A safe house 2 counties over, run by a sister chapter, where walls were thick and loyalties thicker. But justice wasn't just flight. It was the slow burn of truth exposed, the kind that toppled the corrupt without a single shot fired. The standoff stretched, seconds ticking like a fuse in the heat. Harlan's partner lunged forward, grabbing for Lucas's arm, but Tyler intercepted with a swift block, his grip firm but restrained. "Easy," Tyler said, eyes locked on the man's. The sheriff barked an order, pulling his radio, but before static could crackle, Jonathan stepped in, phone already out, recording the scene with steady hands. "Smile for the lens, Sheriff. Oath's got friends in high places, ones who don't bend for badges." The words landed like a gauntlet, reminding Harlan that the Iron Oath's reach extended beyond Blacktop. Lawyers from old war bonds, journalists who'd covered veteran plights, a network woven from promises kept across decades. In that moment, Ethan locked eyes with the boy, seeing the echo of his sister's plea in those young features, the unspoken vow to pull one more from the brink. "Mount up," he commanded softly, guiding Olivia and Lucas toward the nearest bike. She hesitated, glancing at the diner that had been her fragile world, but the engines revving in chorus drowned her doubt. Harlan backed toward his sedan, curses spilling like oil, but he didn't pursue. Not with the convoy's thunder filling the street, locals peering from windows with a mix of awe and long-buried hope. The riders formed a protective phalanx, bikes roaring to life in a symphony of defiance, dust kicking up as they peeled away from the curb. The convoy snaked through Willow Creek's veins, weaving past weathered barns and silent silos, the wind carrying the scent of sun-baked soil and freedom's edge. Lucas rode with Ethan, his small hands gripping tighter now, not from fear, but from the rhythm of rescue. Olivia followed on Tyler's bike, her posture straightening with each mile, the weight of isolation lifting like morning fog. Behind them, the sedans gave chase at first, sirens wailing faintly, but the Oath's numbers and knowledge of the back roads turned the pursuit into a futile shadow. They veered onto a dirt track, cornstalks whispering against fenders, until the town faded into memory. At the safe house, a nondescript farmhouse cloaked in oaks, its porch sagging but secure, the group dismounted under the watchful eyes of more brothers. Samuel checked the perimeter, his military precision a quiet assurance, while Marcus brewed coffee strong enough to wake the dead. Inside, Olivia sat with Lucas at a scarred oak table, the boy's backpack finally unzipped to reveal a crumpled photo of his grandfather, smiling in better days. Ethan leaned against the doorframe, the day's tension easing into resolve. "We'll sort the debts," he said, meeting her gaze. "Not with fists, but with the truth. Records, witnesses, the oath digs deep." She nodded, tears tracing clean paths through the dust on her cheeks. "Why? You don't know us." Ethan's eyes drifted to the horizon, where the sun dipped low, gilding the fields in gold. "Knew someone who did. Promised her I'd stand for the overlooked. This honors that." The words were simple, but they carried the weight of years, a redemption woven into every mile he'd ridden since. As night fell, the farmhouse glowed with lantern light, voices murmuring plans over maps and mugs. The corruption in Willow Creek was a hydra, heads tied to local power, but the iron oath was the blade, patient, unbreaking. For Lucas, the whisper at the light had summoned not just a savior, but a family forged in fire. And for Ethan, it was the promise reignited, burning brighter than any dawn. The lantern light flickered across the scarred oak table in the safe house, casting elongated shadows that danced like wary sentinels on the weathered walls. The air inside carried the rich, earthy aroma of strong coffee, mingling with the faint metallic tang of gun oil from the brothers' quiet maintenance rituals outside. Ethan Hale sat at the table's edge, his calloused fingers tracing the faded lines of a hand-drawn map, the paper crinkling softly under his touch. Across from him, Olivia nursed a mug, her eyes hollowed by exhaustion but sharpened by a mother's unyielding fire. Lucas huddled beside her, picking at a sandwich Tyler had slapped together from pantry staples. Ham on rye, edges curling from the heat, his small bites mechanical, as if appetite were a luxury he couldn't yet afford. Marcus paced the room's perimeter, his boots thudding dully on the creaky floorboards, each step a measured echo of impatience. "The sheriff's got hooks in the county clerk's office," he said, voice low and rough as gravel under tires. "Debts like your pa's, Olivia. They don't just vanish. They're paper trails leading back to shell companies, favors traded like poker chips." He'd spent the afternoon on the burner phone, calling in markers from old contacts. A retired auditor who'd once audited books for the Oath's legal fund, piecing together fragments of Willow Creek's underbelly. The picture emerging was uglier than Ethan had feared, a web of predatory loans masked as community aid, funneled through the sheriff's protection programs, preying on families like Olivia's after losses like her father's illness. No outright violence in the records, just the slow bleed of threats and foreclosures, the kind that left homes empty and spirits broken. Ethan nodded, his steel-grey eyes fixed on the map's dotted lines, marking escape routes and potential strongholds. The farmhouse, tucked in a fold of rolling hills 2 counties west, felt like a brief reprieve, a cluster of outbuildings once used for oath gatherings, now a sanctuary ringed by motion sensors and the unblinking watch of rotating patrols. But safety was illusory. The sedans from Willow Creek had tailed them halfway before peeling off at a crossroads, their retreat a tactical pause rather than surrender. Ethan's mind replayed the standoff at the diner, Harlan's false badge glinting like fool's gold, the way the man's eyes had flickered with the panic of exposure. It stirred the old ghosts, his sister's final days in a dim apartment, debts from her treatments piling like sand dunes, her whisper of "make it mean something" as she slipped away. He'd failed her then, riding off to bury the pain in endless miles. This time, the promise burned hotter, a forge in his chest demanding he hammer truth from the chaos. Outside, the night deepened, stars pricking the velvet sky like distant campfires, the chorus of crickets underscoring the low murmur of engines idling on the perimeter. Tyler leaned against the porch rail, sharing a smoke with Jonathan, their conversation a hushed rhythm of strategy and shared scars. "Kid's tough," Tyler said, exhaling a plume that curled into the cool breeze. "Reminds me of my nephew before the tours took me away. You think the sheriff will call in backups?" Jonathan, lean and watchful with a veteran's quiet intensity, flicked ash into the dirt. "He will. But we've got the high ground here, literally. Samuel's rigging diversions on the access roads. Their bond, forged in the oath's rights after separate hells overseas, was the glue holding the convoy's edges. Not blood, but choice, loyalty, etched deeper than ink. Back inside, Lucas finally spoke, his voice cutting through the tension like a small blade. "Grandpa said not to trust the sheriff. He came after the funeral with papers. Said it was for the hospital bills, but Mom worked extra shifts and it never ended. Olivia's hand tightened on his, knuckles whitening, the scent of her diner apron, faint grease and vanilla from spilled syrup, still clinging to her clothes. "Your grandpa trusted too much," she murmured, eyes meeting Ethan's. "He was a vet like some of you. Fought in places that left him hollow, came home to a town that forgot him. Those loans, they promised relief, but it was a trap." Ethan's jaw clenched. The parallel to his own father's mill debts, a raw nerve. The iron oath had risen from such ashes, brothers pulling each other from personal abysses, vowing to shield the vulnerable from institutional vultures. "We'll trace it to the source," he said, voice steady as an anchor chain. "No more shadows, the truth's our weapon." As midnight approached, the group huddled closer, the map now annotated with scribbled notes, names of witnesses in Willow Creek, a sympathetic nurse at the local clinic who'd seen families shattered by the same scheme. Even a disgruntled deputy, Harlan, had crossed. Samuel entered then, dust from the roads streaking his face, carrying a satchel of pilfered documents, clerk's office scraps obtained through a back-channel favor. "It's rotten to the core," he reported, spreading pages across the table, signatures forged, interest rates buried in fine print, ties to out-of-state financiers who laundered through small-town badges. But one detail snagged Ethan's breath. A faded photo tucked in the folds, showing Harlan shaking hands with a younger man at a Veterans Hall fundraiser. Olivia's father, smiling trustingly. The cycle of betrayal hit like a gut punch, reminding Ethan of his own unkept vow to his sister, the years wasted in solitary rides. Doubt crept in then, a psychological fog Ethan hadn't felt since the desert nights questioning his command. What if exposing this unleashed worse? The oath's code demanded justice, but the cost, endangering Lucas, drawing fire on Olivia's fragile new start, gnawed at him. He stepped onto the porch, the wooden planks groaning under his weight, and lit a cigarette, the flame briefly illuminating the furrows in his brow. The smoke curled upward, carrying unspoken questions into the starlit void. Tyler joined him, sensing the storm. "Second thoughts?" he asked, voice soft against the night's hush. Ethan exhaled slowly, the ember glowing like a resolve rekindling. "Not on the promise, but on the price. We've got a family here now. Chosen, yeah, but real." Tyler clapped his shoulder, the gesture solid as iron. "That's why we ride together. Oath isn't just words. It's the stand when it hurts." Inside, Olivia tucked Lucas into a makeshift bed in the back room, the boys breathing evening out under the quilt's weight. She emerged, finding Ethan still on the porch, and sat beside him, the wicker chair creaking in protest. "Thank you," she said simply, the words heavy with the unsaid, "for turning around." Ethan met her gaze, the vulnerability in it mirroring his own buried ache. Promised someone once. Time to keep it. As the first hints of false dawn grayed the horizon, a distant engine rumble signaled more brothers arriving. Reinforcements from the southern chapters, engines purring like a gathering storm. The safe house pulsed with purpose now, plans solidifying into action, a dawn ride to gather evidence. Quiet alliances with locals who'd suffered in silence. But Ethan knew the real battle was internal. The ethical tightrope of mercy versus reckoning, corruption's tendrils reaching for the light they'd ignited. The air grew crisp, carrying the promise of movement as the convoy prepared to roll once more. For Ethan, the boy's whisper had unraveled not just a town's secrets, but the knots in his soul, pulling him toward a redemption that demanded everything. Loyalty wasn't a chain, it was the road ahead, winding toward justice's hard-won dawn. If this chapter stirred something in you, smash that like button. It helps these stories reach more lost souls who need them. The first pale streaks of dawn bled across the horizon. turning the safe house's oak-shrouded silhouette into a sentinel etched in soft gold and lingering shadow. Ethan Hale stood on the porch, the rough-hewn railing biting into his palms as he watched the reinforcements roll in, a steady procession of Harleys and choppers, their exhausts trailing wisps of blue smoke that mingled with the dew-heavy mist rising from the fields. The air was alive with the low thrum of engines cooling, punctuated by the clink of kickstands dropping and the murmur of greetings exchanged in gravelly tones. Marcus clapped shoulders with the newcomers, his scarred face splitting into a rare grin, while Tyler distributed thermoses of coffee, the steam curling like unspoken vows in the chill morning. Inside, the farmhouse stirred with purpose. Olivia moved about the kitchen with quiet efficiency, slicing bread and cracking eggs into a skillet, the sizzle and pop filling the space with a domestic rhythm that belied the storm brewing. Lucas sat at the table, his backpack open now, spilling forth dog-eared drawings and a tarnished locket, remnants of a life interrupted. Ethan's gaze lingered on the boy, the weight of protection settling heavier with each passing hour. The documents Samuel had unearthed lay spread before them, yellowed pages whispering of betrayals, loan agreements with clauses hidden like landmines, signatures that didn't match, and Harlan's name scrawled on approvals that reeked of favoritism. "This ties back to the Veterans Fund," Samuel said, tapping a faded receipt. His voice a measured cadence honed from briefing rooms overseas. "Your pa's medical debts funneled through it, Olivia, meant to help, but it drained instead. Interest compounding, like interest on a grudge." Olivia's hands paused over the stove, the spatula hovering, as if suspended in memory. The scent of frying eggs sharpened, cutting through the underlying must of aged wood and oiled leather. He believed in that fund, fought for his country, came home expecting the same. Her words carried the quiet indictment of a woman who'd pieced together a life from scraps, only to watch it unravel. Ethan felt the echo in his bones, the mill's closure, his father's hollow-eyed surrender to creditors, the promise he'd made in a rain-lashed graveyard to never let the overlooked fade. He'd broken it in his wandering years, numbing the failure with the roar of the road, but the iron oath had rebuilt him, brother by brother, into a man who stood firm. Now, with Lucas's wide eyes watching him, that foundation trembled under the ethical precipice. Expose the rot and risk retaliation, or ride away, leaving the wound to fester. The group gathered around the table as the sun crested fully, bathing the room in a warm, unforgiving light that highlighted the creases in their faces, lines drawn by battles seen and unseen. Jonathan unrolled a larger map, marking Willow Creek with pins, the diner, the sheriff's office, the clinic where the sympathetic nurse waited. "We split, some ride for statements, others shadow Harlan's moves. No direct confrontation yet. Gather the proof, let it speak." Tyler nodded, his fresh scar pulling taut as he flexed his hands. "I've got a contact in the next county, a reporter who owes the oath for pulling his brother from a bad ride. She'll amplify if we feed her clean." The plan unfolded like a well-rehearsed maneuver, voices overlapping in low harmony, the clatter of mugs punctuating agreements. But Ethan sensed the undercurrent, the psychological fray. Each man carried his own ghosts, loyalties tested by the cost of justice in a world that rewarded silence. As they mounted up, the convoy dividing into flanks, Ethan chose the ride to the clinic with Olivia and Lucas. The back roads wound through mist-shrouded hollows, tires humming over gravel that crunched like brittle bones, the landscape a tapestry of endless fields bending under the breeze. Lucas rode pillion, his grip tentative but trusting, the wind whipping his jacket with a rhythmic flap. Olivia followed in a borrowed truck driven by Marcus, her face set in determination, the locket now around her neck glinting like a talisman. Ethan's mind churned with dilemmas. The sheriff's reach could poison wells beyond Willow Creek, turning allies into liabilities. What if the truth dragged innocents under? The desert ambush flashed unbidden. Brothers lost not to bullets alone, but to the hesitation of command, a promise to lead that had cracked under fire. He throttled harder, the engines growled, drowning the doubt, but it lingered, a shadow pacing his resolve. The clinic squatted on the town's edge, a squat brick building with peeling paint and a parking lot dotted by rusted sedans. They parked discreetly, the bike's presence muffled by the morning quiet, only the faint scent of antiseptic leaking from open windows. Inside, the nurse, Eleanor, mid-40s with kind eyes shadowed by weariness, met them in a back office. The door clicking shut like a vow sealed. "I've seen too many like your father," she said to Olivia, pulling files from a locked drawer, the paper rustling softly. Debts twisted into nooses. Harlan signs off on them all, says it's community support, but it's control. Her testimony spilled out in hushed tones. Families evicted, veterans denied care, a pattern of aggression veiled as procedure. No graphic scars detailed, just the quiet devastation, the empty chairs in waiting rooms, the echoes of pleas ignored. Ethan recorded it all on his phone, the device's soft beep a digital sentinel, while Lucas sketched idly on a notepad, his pencil scratching tales of home. But as Eleanor handed over copies, a shadow fell across the window. A patrol car idling outside, Harlan's deputy peering through the blinds. The air thickened, hearts pounding in sync with the distant tick of a wall clock. "They're watching," Olivia whispered, pulling Lucas close, the boy's small frame tensing like a coiled spring. Ethan signaled Marcus via text, flank secure, and received a swift affirmative. But the ethical bind tightened. Bolt now and lose momentum, or press and invite the storm. He chose the stand, voice low as he faced the door. "We finish this. Truth doesn't run." The deputy entered then, badge flashing under fluorescent hum, his stance aggressive but eyes flickering with uncertainty, the fracture in the corrupt facade. "Official inquiry, hand over the boy." But Eleanor stepped forward, files clutched like armor. "This is about records, not custody, and I've got names to match yours." The standoff hummed with tension, the scent of stale coffee from the lobby underscoring the standoff's edge. Outside, engines revved faintly, Oath brothers circling, a reminder that loyalty moved in shadows as well as light. Ethan met the deputy's gaze, his own unblinking. The promise to his sister a steel thread, holding him steady. "Walk away, or the light finds you first." The deputy hesitated, radio crackling unanswered, then retreated with a muttered threat, the door slamming like a deferred reckoning. They slipped out the back, hearts racing, the convoy reforming on a hidden trail. As they rode toward the next waypoint, a neutral meet with the reporter, the sun climbed higher, burning off the mist to reveal the road's unforgiving curve. Ethan felt the weight shift. Redemption wasn't solitary, it was the collective stand, promises interlocking like chain links. For Lucas, the whisper had summoned a tide. For Ethan, it was the forge testing his soul's metal. Justice's dawn, breaking slow but inexorable. The wind carried them forward, toward revelations that would shatter the veil, one ethical stride at a time. The back trail twisted like a vein through the underbelly of the rolling hills, gravel spitting under the tires as the convoy pushed forward, engines humming a low, urgent symphony against the midday sun. Ethan Hale led the flank, his Harley cutting the lead with precision, born of countless shadowed rides, the wind slicing through his vest to carry the sharp tang of wild grass and sun-warmed earth. Lucas clung to his back, the boy's helmet bobbing slightly, his earlier tension easing into a quiet rhythm that synced with the bike's pulse. Behind them, Olivia rode with Marcus in the borrowed truck, its suspension groaning over ruts, while Tyler and Jonathan scouted the flanks, their bikes weaving like guardians through the sparse cover of oaks. The air hummed with unspoken strategy, the documents from the clinic tucked securely in Ethan's saddlebag, pages that could unravel Harlan's web if they reached the right eyes. As they crested a rise, the landscape opened to a forgotten crossroads, where a weathered gas station squatted like a relic from another era, its pumps rusted and pumps silent under a faded canopy. The reporter, Clara Voss, a sharp-eyed woman in her late 30s with a notebook perpetually at hand, waited in a nondescript sedan, her engine idling like a held breath. She'd come from the next county over, drawn by Tyler's call and the oath's quiet pull. Her brother had been one of theirs once, pulled from a spiral of post-tour isolation by a midnight ride and a listening ear. Ethan pulled up first, killing the engine with a flick, the sudden quiet amplifying the distant call of a hawk wheeling overhead. Dust settled around them in lazy swirls, carrying the faint acrid bite of old gasoline from the station's tanks. Clara stepped out, her practical boots crunching on the gravel, eyes scanning the group with the wary assessment of someone who'd chased truths through too many dead ends. "You said this was big," she said, voice clipped but curious, pulling a recorder from her pocket. The device caught the light, a small silver gleam amid the sun's relentless glare. Ethan dismounted, helping Lucas down with a steady hand, the boys' sneakers hitting the ground softly. Olivia joined them, her face a mask of resolve etched with fatigue, the locket at her throat catching the breeze. "It's bigger than debts," Ethan replied, his gravel tone carrying the weight of the morning's narrow escape. "It's a system preying on the ones who served, the ones who trusted. We've got records, loans twisted into traps, badges signing off on the squeeze." He handed over the satchel, the leather creaking as it changed hands, pages rustling like dry leaves in confession. They gathered under the canopy's shadow, the air cooler there, laced with the musty scent of stagnant oil and faint rubber from discarded tires piled nearby. Clara pored over the documents, her brow furrowing as she traced signatures and clauses, the recorder capturing Olivia's halting account, the endless shifts at the diner, the collector's veiled warnings after her father's passing, the way hope had curdled into fear. Lucas added fragments, his voice small but clear, describing the night he'd been taken, not with blows detailed, but the chill of rough hands and the slam of a door echoing in the dark. Ethan's chest tightened with each word, the parallels to his sister's unraveling a raw undercurrent, the medical bills that had swallowed her light, the promise he'd whispered at her bedside to shield others from that void. He'd ridden alone then, the oath a distant thunder, but now it surged around him, brothers forming a loose circle, their presence a silent bulwark against the world's indifference. Clara's eyes lifted, sharp as a blade's edge. "This ties to state funding, veterans' aid siphoned through local cutouts. Harlan's not the head, he's a tentacle. I've got sources in the capital who'll verify, but it'll take time and heat." She glanced at the road, where a faint dust plume hinted at distant traffic, the psychological weight of exposure settling like fog. Ethan nodded, his mind mapping the risks. Harlan's retaliation could manifest in raids, whispers turning to warrants, the oath painted as vigilantes in a narrative spun by corrupt pens. The ethical coil tightened, push for swift publication and invite chaos on the safe house, or temper the fire, letting truth simmer until ironclad. Marcus leaned in from the truck's cab, his scarred knuckles drumming the wheel. "We hold the line, no half measures. The oath rides for the full dawn." As Clara pocketed the recorder, promising a draft by nightfall via encrypted channels, the horizon darkened, not with clouds, but the growl of approaching vehicles. 2 patrol cars crested the rise, lights flashing silently at first, then sirens cutting the air like a warning cry. Harlan's deputies, faces set in grim lines behind windshields, blocked the crossroads mouth. Ethan felt the old desert instinct surge. Assess, stand, protect. "Mount up!" he commanded, voice low but carrying like a command in the wind. Tyler and Jonathan revved their engines, forming a barrier, while Samuel, arriving from a side trail with reinforcements, flanked the rear, his bike's headlight piercing the dust. Lucas scrambled onto Ethan's bike, Olivia sliding into the truck with a fierce glance that said more than words. This fight was theirs now, woven into the family's chosen threads. The lead deputy emerged, megaphone in hand, his voice booming distorted over the static. "Stand down. This is a restricted area, illegal assembly." But his eyes betrayed the bluff, darting to the oath's numbers, now swelled to 30, vests gleaming like a united front under the sun. Clara slipped into her sedan, engine turning over with a sputter, but not before Ethan caught her nod, a pact sealed in shared purpose. No charges flew, no pursuits ignited. The deputies held position, a fragile dam against the tide, knowing one wrong move could flood the story into print. Ethan throttled gently, the convoy peeling away in controlled thunder, weaving onto a parallel track that dove into the hill's embrace. The wind rushed past, cool against heated skin, carrying the scent of pine resin from encroaching woods, the escape a temporary veil over the gathering storm. Miles later, as the safe house came into view, its lanterns already flickering against the approaching dusk, Ethan pulled aside, letting the group surge ahead. He killed the engine, the silence enveloping him like an old friend, and lit a cigarette, the match's flare brief and bright. The smoke curled upward, mingling with the evening's first chill as he replayed the crossroads. The deputy's hesitation, Clara's fire, the boy's trusting grip. Redemption wasn't a solitary blaze. It was this, promises interlocking across scars, loyalty a road that bent but never broke. But doubt lingered, a psychological shadow. Harlan's web extended further, tentacles reaching for retaliation that could test the oath's core. Ethan exhaled, the ember glowing defiant, and remounted, the engine's roar pulling him back into the fold. Night would bring Clara's words, the first cracks in the corruption's facade. But dawn promised the reckoning, justice's slow, unyielding forge, where honor met the abyss and held. For the whisper at the light, the turn that had changed everything, this was the deepening path, winding toward a light no darkness could claim. The velvet cloak of night had fully descended over the safe house, wrapping the farmhouse in a hush, broken only by the occasional creak of settling timbers and the distant hoot of an owl perched in the oaks. Lanterns glowed softly through the windows, casting warm pools of light that danced across the scarred oak table where the group reconvened. Ethan Hale sat at the head, his broad frame silhouetted against the flickering flames, the faint scent of cigarette smoke still clinging to his leather vest like a lingering echo of the day's tensions. The satchel from Clara Voss lay open before them, its contents augmented by fresh notes scribbled in hurried ink, timestamps from her recorder, cross-reference dates tying Harlan's approvals to diverted funds, and a timeline of families shattered by the same insidious loans. Olivia paced the room's edge, her footsteps soft on the worn rug, the locket at her throat swaying like a pendulum, marking the hours of waiting. Lucas dozed in the corner on a cot, his breathing steady now. The terror from the stoplight faded into the security of chosen walls. Marcus leaned against the counter, nursing a mug of coffee gone cold, his scarred knuckles drumming a silent rhythm of anticipation. "Her draft hit the encrypted line an hour ago," he said, voice low as the rumble of an idling engine. "It's tight. Names the sheriff, links the loans to state coffers, calls out the Veterans Fund as a front. She's holding publish till we greenlight, but the heat's building. Patrols spotted near the county line." Ethan's steel-grey eyes scanned the pages, the paper crinkling under his calloused fingers, each word a spark igniting the forge of resolve within him. The ethical storm had raged all afternoon, doubt whispering of unintended fallout, the oath branded as interlopers, innocence caught in the crossfire of exposure. But as he traced the forged signatures, memories surged, his sister's frail hand in his, her final plea to stand for the silent ones, the guilt that had propelled him into the iron oath's embrace. This wasn't vengeance, it was restitution. Justice carved from the moral grain of promises long buried. He nodded to Marcus. "Send the go. Truth rides at dawn." The night deepened, the air inside thickening with the aroma of reheated stew, simple fare of potatoes and venison from the pantry, steam rising in lazy curls that carried hints of time and earth. Tyler and Jonathan returned from perimeter watch, their boots tracking faint mud across the threshold, faces etched with the vigilance of men who'd guarded more than borders. "Road's clear for now," Tyler reported, dropping into a chair with a sigh, the wood groaning under his weight. But Harlan's stirring. Word from a mole in the office. He's rallying deputies, spinning tales of biker threats to cover his tracks. Samuel joined them, his lean frame slipping through the door like a shadow, carrying a laptop borrowed from Clara's network. The screen's blue glow illuminated his features as he pulled up preliminary responses, shares from advocacy groups, murmurs from state investigators who'd long suspected the rot. Olivia stopped pacing, her eyes meeting Ethan's across the table, a silent current of gratitude and shared burden passing between them. If this breaks open, what then? The diner, our home, it's all tied to those debts. Her voice held the quiet strength of a woman who'd bent but never broken, the scent of her earlier cooking still faint on her sleeves. Ethan leaned forward, the lantern light catching the faded tattoos on his forearms, symbols of oaths sworn in desert nights. "We rebuild. The oath's got funds set aside for families like yours. Clean starts. No strings. But first, we end the cycle." Lucas stirred then, rubbing his eyes and sitting up, the boy's presence a poignant anchor, his whisper at the light now the catalyst for this gathering storm. As midnight bled into the early hours, the farmhouse pulsed with preparation. Phones buzzed with confirmations from distant chapters, brothers ready to amplify the story across networks, from veteran forums to quiet presses that valued truth over headlines. Ethan stepped outside, the porch cool under his boots, the night sky a vast canopy of stars that mirrored the unyielding web of loyalty binding them. The wind whispered through the leaves, carrying the crisp bite of impending rain, and he felt the psychological weight lift slightly, redemption's path clarifying in the darkness. He'd turned at that stoplight not by chance, but by the pull of an ancient promise, one that demanded he face the abyss of corruption with integrity, not fury. Dawn broke with a gentle fury, the first rays piercing the horizon like arrows of light, gilding the convoy's chrome as it assembled in the yard. Engines coughed to life in a chorus of thunder, the air vibrating with exhaust and resolve, the scent of dew-kissed grass mingling with hot metal. Clara's article hit the wires at first light, headlines rippling outward. Small-town sheriff exposed, predatory loans target veterans' families. Responses flooded in, state attorneys pledging audits, locals emerging with their own testimonies, the tide turning against Harlan's facade. By mid-morning, as the oath rode into Willow Creek under a sky clearing to blue, the sheriff's office stood eerily quiet, badges absent from the streets, whispers of resignations already circulating. They parked before the diner, the neon sign humming softly, its glow a beacon of fragile normalcy. Olivia dismounted first, Lucas at her side, the boy's hand in hers a symbol of reclaimed ground. Inside, the booths filled with familiar faces, farmers and waitstaff who'd suffered in silence, now nodding with quiet solidarity. Ethan lingered outside, watching as brothers distributed packets of aid, cleared debt notices from oath lawyers, vouchers for fresh starts. Harlan's sedan sat abandoned at the curb, doors ajar, the false badge glinting mockingly in the sun. A hollow relic of power undone. Olivia emerged, tears tracing paths down her cheeks, but her smile was the dawn itself, warm, unshadowed. "It's over," she said, embracing Lucas tightly. Ethan nodded, the weight in his chest easing to a profound peace, the promise to his sister fulfilled in this moment of moral victory. The Iron Oath had stood not as outlaws, but as guardians. Their loyalty a force that bent the corrupt without breaking the innocent. As the convoy prepared to disperse, engines revving in farewell, Ethan mounted his bike, the road ahead stretching infinite and true. The boy's whisper had changed everything, forging a family from strangers, redemption from regret, a legacy of honor riding eternal. Thank you for joining this journey to the end. If these tales of promise and loyalty touched your heart, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. We've got more roads to ride together, honoring the overlooked one story at a time.